Hello and welcome to the Academy of European Law. I'm Jean-Philippe Rajat, the director of the Academy. Today we are very pleased to launch a new series of video podcasts called ERA Talks. The aim of the ERA Talks is to explain and discuss some of the current challenges facing the European Union by interviewing leading figures from the legal, judicial, academic, political and other circles that make Europe what it is. My guest today is from Poland. He's a lawyer, a law professor, a politician. He was the National Ombudsman from 2015 until July 2021. In the 2023 parliamentary elections, he ran as a civic coalition candidate for the Senate and was elected senator. Since December 2023, he has been the Polish Minister of Justice in the government of Donald Tusk. It's my pleasure to welcome Minister of Justice Adam Bodnar. Minister, great to have you with us.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for this opportunity to start this series of podcasts with you.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. Before we turn to current affairs, I would like to mention an anniversary. In May 2004, exactly 20 years ago, Poland joined the European Union together with 9 other countries, mainly from the central and eastern part of Europe. And the EU you joined at that time is very different from the EU of today. And I would say that Poland has also changed a lot in the meantime. I see you as a pro-European. And so my first question is, for those in Poland and maybe also in Europe who are not convinced or who were convinced and are now disappointed, what would be your main arguments to them to praise the European projects and its impact on your country?
On the one hand, it is a very simple question. On the other hand, it is a very difficult question. Because for me personally, joining the EU is a little bit like the story of my generation. Okay, so I was a graduate of law studies after 2000, and there were a number of people from my studies, from my colleagues, that were basically dreaming about Poland becoming the EU member state. Because for us, it meant a little bit like the finalization of this first step of the transformation of Poland from the communist regime. So it was just after 15 years from the moment of the start of transformation from 1989. So still my generation remembered a little bit at least how Poland looked like, and when Poland was a communist country that was almost bankrupt, with a lot of social problems and with a lot of and later on during the economic transformation with a huge unemployment and some disastrous situation in the economy. And then when we are studying law, political sciences, international relations, we thought that okay, we'll join the EU, which means that we'll be able to travel, we'll be able to work in other EU member states, but also we'll be able to work in European institutions. So I remember that, for example, when I was studying law, studying EU law was very popular because people were thinking, okay, one day we'll become part of the European institutions and we'll be able to use this EU law. It is kind of a power, it's a little bit like the sense of our new European identity. Mm-hmm. But of course, from the point of view of like the general population, the EU was regarded as a little bit like the civilizational step, that we are becoming like the ordinary citizens of Europe and not second-class citizens. Please remember that it was after so many years when Polish people were going to Germany, France, Netherlands, UK as migrant workers, when they were emigrated in order to work, and they were treated as second-rate citizens. And now you are joining EU, which means that you are equal to others. It was an important thing. But for those who stayed, European integration was important from the point of view simply of free movement of goods, of services, of freedom of developing economic activity throughout the whole Europe, but also from the point of view of supporting workers, supporting farmers with subsidies, with a possibility of obtaining different grants and subsidies for the development of your different businesses. So somehow Polish people took a very good lesson how to use effectively EU money for the purposes of restructuring of Poland, but also for the purposes of using all those benefits of the EU law and EU integration in order to develop properly in the EU. But interestingly, when you would ask right now somebody from the young generation, most probably they would not be able to answer all those questions because they treat the European Union as something normal, something obvious. They don't remember what is passport. They don't, for them, going to Krakow.
They don't know.
They don't know usually. For them to go to study in Netherlands, in Barcelona, in Krakow is just one of the life choices. Without any hesitation, because most of them speak English and they know it's simply a matter of money and some matter of some fantasy where to go and to study. And interestingly, and maybe that will be like the last point, some of them realized what is the EU when United Kingdom exited from the European Union, because suddenly, they were in the age of 17, 18. They thought about, studying in Oxford, Cambridge, Edinburgh, and so on. And suddenly, they didn't have this opportunity. So somehow they started to understand what is really the real understanding of the equality principle, of equal citizenship in the EU. But in general, they treat the EU as air. You breathe the air, but you don't feel it. You treat it as something normal. And so sometimes, it needs additional exercise to explain to them why the EU matters to them, why the EU is important from the daily point of view of their life.
Thank you. And maybe actually the next question is closely linked to that one, because I would like to move now to one of the major problems in Europe in general and in Poland in particular, the rule of law crisis. In recent years, there has been a regression of the rule of law in Poland, or not only in Poland, and there has been a systemic problem with the independence of the courts. It's not me saying this, it's a fact, and I think you could talk for hours about this. But let me ask you first, what do you think are the reasons for this rule of law crisis in Poland and perhaps in Europe in general? What are the reasons for this?
Of course, you may interpret it just politically. You may say that there are some strong leaders that decided to build states that are not subject of checks and balances, and leaders that are using their executive power to have influence on other sectors of power, especially on judiciary. Mm-hmm. But I think it is the explanation that does not bring you closer in order to understand what is really happening. Of course, without those leaders, some bad things would not happen. Okay, and I don't want to use names here, but I think every listener to our conversation, every viewer would basically know about whom I'm talking. But please look that they could use this opportunity to enforce their illiberal power in a very special environment. So one of the points, one of the factors is that there was some level of dissatisfaction with the EU, that the EU is not resolving all the life problems. You are not immediately becoming like great economy, that there are still people that are poor, that are underprivileged, that are dissatisfied with the government. Second, and I see like one of the major problems is the question of communication in the modern society. My point is that right now it is quite difficult in any country, whether it is United States, whether it is these are European countries, it is difficult to explain to citizens what is the importance, value of decisions that are made by authorities, and what is the connection between the citizens and the public power. Why? Because we have the emergence of social media, and as a result of social media, we have the emergence of disinformation. So, for example, if you have a decision of the court which is controversial, it is easy to attack this decision with one tweet, with one TikTok message, but it takes much more time to explain to the public that this decision is much more complex and that the given judge had certain grants to issue that kind of a decision. So, moreover, sometimes politicians take advantage of this. So politicians are using this opportunity to attack courts because it is simply easy target. Courts usually cannot defend themselves effectively, and all of this creates a situation in which those that are at power, those that have been elected, are trying to create certain restrictions and pressure on different independent bodies, such as courts, ombudsman institutions, audit chambers, different institutions that are part of this so-called checks and balances structure of the state. So they are using this communication opportunity in order to strengthen their power and in order to disempower those that are guardians. And that is the reason, in my opinion, why we have those authoritarian tendencies. So on the one hand, dissatisfaction, on the other hand, the skillful use of that kind of instruments. And European Union is also victim of this process. Sometimes if you are not effective with certain policies domestically, it is much easier to attack somebody in Brussels that allegedly has made some decisions than, for example, your own failures, your own mistakes, or your own lack of imagination, which means that at the end of the day, the European Union is losing in credibility, is losing in popularity. And just look at Brexit. Brexit was the result of not just, we know it right now, it was to great extent result of the disinformation that has been also inspired by Russians. And using this kind of a narrative, attacking the European Union, attacking the migration that happens as a result of European Union. Voters made this decision. Now, it seems to me they are not very much happy with it, but it is quite difficult for UK citizens to get back to the European Union.
Yeah, sure. And what are the reforms that you are undertaking right now to restore this confidence in the justice system in Poland?
So please note that our rule of law crisis was based on this idea of creating different methods of controlling your operation of courts. It does not mean that any politician had a direct phone to this or the other judge. It was about creating a certain system in which everybody who is in the judiciary is behaving in a certain expected way, or is afraid of making some unpopular independent decisions, because he or she would know that the consequence of that kind of a decision could be some form of sanction. Either some naming and shaming in press, or disciplinary actions, sometimes even suspending judges. And moreover, on top of this, you are creating mechanism where you are controlling the legislation. So I mean that such bodies like the Constitutional Court are becoming non-operational. Or even if they are used, that they are used in order to strengthen the government. And second, you are creating a system of judicial nominations that are, let's say, politically checked from the point of view of potential risk to the political party. So what happened in Poland was like the creation on different levels of the system of government that was to great extent controlled by those who are having the majority in the parliament. And it is interesting because this creation did not happen overnight. It happened over a certain period of time, and it consisted of different elements and methods of achieving a certain situation. And now, 2023, October, we have elections, parliamentary elections, and then new government comes to power. The new government has a strong public support. There was a 75% turnout in elections, and as a result of this, as a result of those elections, the new government has this idea and this major aim to recover from the rule of law crisis. So this task is given to me. So I'm entrusted with Prime Minister Donald Tusk to make different reforms. I have proposed an action plan to the action plan to the European Commission and to the Council of the European Union. I have also made different small reforms in order to unblock money from the EU recovery fund, which was successful. We have decided to join the European Public Prosecution Office, but on top of this, we need to adopt a series of legislative pieces. So laws concerning the National Council of Judiciary, the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, the separation of the office of the Minister of Justice and the Prosecutor General, as well as the law on the statutes of judges. So basically, we must somehow verify statutes of judges that have been appointed after 2018. And basically, right now we are in the process. So we have adopted laws on the National Council of Judiciary and the Constitutional Court, but surprise, surprise, those laws have been questioned by Mr. President, so they are not yet binding. Okay, so we don't know how long we are going to wait for those laws. Other laws are in the pipeline, but most probably we'll have to wait with the finalization of the work on those laws until the moment when we are having the new president of Poland, because the current one is basically blocking any changes because he feels that all the legislative and practical changes made between 2015 and 2023 were basically okay from the point of view of constitutionality. So we are a little bit in a difficult situation. We are trying to rebuild the system using the existing legislation, existing possibilities. We are passing the legislation, but we cannot finalize things. Okay, so we have to. So we are still in the process, a little bit in this kind of a, I would say maybe even interregnum period. Fortunately, there is like one thing that helps us a lot, which is kind of an anchor of those changes, which is the case law of the Court of Justice of the EU and the case law of the European Court of Human Rights, as well as number of recommendations, statements, positions by the European Commission. So it is for us like the point of departure and an anchor in our process of changes. So we know that sooner or later we must abide by all the EU rules and all the rules stemming from the European Convention on Human Rights, and we must finalize those reforms in such a way that they would be accepted not only domestically but also internationally.
Mm-hmm. And how you explained, I mean, it did not happen overnight. And I mean, so my question is, how long will it take you to reverse the situation? I mean, and how sustainable can your reforms be? I mean, another future government could be tempted to change again the justice system and go to another direction. It's very, very fragile, everything.
It is very fragile. You are right. This process of changes lasted for 8 years. Okay, mm-hmm. We had democratic elections, so we've made a little bit like the revolution as a result of those elections, but a revolution in a peaceful way, without any violence on streets. But just voters said no, we cannot agree on this system of government. Okay, we would like to invest into this new government. Please note that those elections happened not just once again overnight, but just 2 weeks before elections we had 1 million people demonstration in Warsaw. It was really massive. I still feel this energy of people during this demonstration. Our Prime Minister Donald Tusk proved to be like this important leader for those difficult times. So he proved that it is possible to get out of this illiberal system using democratic means. Mm-hmm. But right now we have to rebuild it also using democratic means. We cannot use violence in order to rebuild the system. So the whole point is how to make it effectively and in a sustainable way. I claim that on the basis of existing legislation, we should do everything what is possible. And for example, I have this chance of cooperating with judges in local courts in order to change presidents of courts. It is really important thing. I have certain possibilities of stopping some undue disciplinary cases against Polish judges that were protesting over last years. Mm-hmm. It is also possible. I have some possibilities of changing the way how the prosecution service is working. So there are certain things that are, I would say, achievable in the Polish context these days. But those long-term reforms require legislative change. So most probably within a year from now we will be able to pass those reforms because presidential elections are scheduled to happen in May 2025. and we'll have a new president more or less with the beginning of August 2025. Yeah.
Okay.
But still, passing reforms is one thing. Second thing is creation of those new reformed institutions, like the National Council of Judiciary, like the Constitutional Court, and second, verification of the statutes of judges. It could be a very burdensome long-term effort, how to make it, and most probably we'll do it until the end of the term of this parliament, which means until 2027. And still, you are right that the whole system must be fragile. But in my opinion, by being integral, honest, and consequent in what we are doing, we should secure winning next elections. We should deliver the effort in such a way that people would trust us again, and we would be able to prolong the system of rebuilding the state. So, for example, I would just give you like one practical example. Can you imagine that previous government had a problem with selecting the judge of the European Court of Human Rights? The procedure is pretty simple. You must create a committee, you must select a candidate, and then Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe is selecting the one, okay, out of the 3 candidates. And somehow, because of different violations of procedure, 3 times Parliamentary Assembly rejected Polish list of candidates. Okay, the new government started a new proper competition without any bias, without any promotion of this or the other candidate, and it is regarded right now in the Council of Europe as like the best example of how to make it properly. Okay, and just a couple of days ago, new Polish judge has been elected, Madam Anna Adamska-Galant. Okay, so I give this example because governing country is not only about whether you are doing certain things, but it is also about certain style, about certain method of working. So, for example, to any position that is under the umbrella of the Ministry of Justice right now, I organize competitions. Okay, because I don't want to be even in this position that this or the other friend is promoted to this or the other position. Okay, everybody should have equal chances. I create committees; they are selecting proper people, and the same with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I hope that that kind of a method of being really honest, integral, transparent in governing country would bring you some kind of a positive result from voters. Maybe I'm naive, but somehow I don't see any other way how to do it. And of course, you must be effective in your policy making. That is pretty obvious. So not only the method, but also results would be subject of assessment by voters. So that is how I read this sustainability.
Thank you very much. Another big challenge for Europe that I wanted to address is, of course, the war in Ukraine. Poland has been from the start one of the strongest allies of Ukraine and has remained it since then. So there's, if I understand it well, there's no difference between the former government and the current one on this matter. In other words, is there a consensus about Ukraine at political level in your country, and how do you explain this?
There is a consensus, and interestingly, even before the war, we were consistent regarding our approach towards different policies by Russia. For example, we are always everybody, whether you're left wing, right wing, or center, we are, for example, always protesting against Nord Stream, because we thought that Nord Stream is simply this kind of a weapon of imperialistic policy of Russia, of creating whole Europe dependent on Russian gas. We are supporting human rights defenders from Russia, for example, from the association Memorial. We are protesting against annexation of Crimea. And so, whatever government you will see, you will have the same feeling. Why is it so? First of all, because of our history, obviously. We are not on the map of Europe for more than 123 years, between 1795 and 1918. So being anti-Russian is a little bit part of our history. Second, we are subject of the so-called Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact before the Second World War, and so the eastern part of the Polish territory has been taken over by Soviet Union. And then we are a country that was dependent on Soviet Union between 1945 and 1989. We are independent country, but still in this realm of those communist countries being the part of so-called Warsaw Pact. So it is part of our history to be always hesitant towards what this big neighbor, this big bear behind our eastern borders is doing, and that is how we see the situation in Ukraine. It is not just a war concerning the independence of Ukraine, identity of Ukrainians, but it is about creating, or maybe rather not even creating, but recreating the zone of control by Russia, by the same zone of control as it was during the times of the Soviet Union. So it is about this imperialistic policy of Russia. We know well that that if Ukraine fails, then there are next countries on the list like Moldova, like Georgia, and that possibly Russia may go deeper and deeper, maybe not in terms of military conflict, but in terms of creating this zone of dependence, and of course it creates a threat to European Union. Mm-hmm. So for us it is not just a question of supporting Ukrainian people, but also supporting the current European project, which is based on democracy, rule of law, human rights, and also the sovereign independence of all the member states of the European Union. So it is the war about not recreating some kind of a new Iron Curtain, and so that's why Poland is so much engaged into supporting Ukraine.
Supporting Ukraine means, do you think Ukraine should join the EU soon?
I don't know whether Ukraine should join soon. I know there is like a long discussion what should be the what should be conditions for Ukraine joining the EU, to what extent you should make proper preparation, how to free the country out of corruption, also how to resolve different historical tensions, because we are also having some tensions as Poland with Ukraine, but for sure the place of Ukraine is sooner or later in the European Union.
And you would say the same about the Western Balkan countries, which have been waiting also for quite some time?
In my opinion, the situation with Western Balkan countries is such that either we create a track for them for joining the EU, or we are leaving them at mercy of some Russian influence. There are some countries in Western Balkans that are under strong pressure coming from Russia. So the question is whether this kind of a situation may spread to other countries of Western Balkans. So in my opinion, like the strong policy of the European Union of extension of EU to Balkan states should be important. And look, we have really great successes of this. We have some Balkan countries already in the EU, and we see how successful it was for their development, but also for the EU as such. Look at Croatia and Slovenia. So why not other countries from the region should not join the EU if they fulfill all the Copenhagen criteria? And here we come back to the rule of law discussion, because exactly. I know that this whole conflict concerning rule of law in Poland is also important lesson for the EU, how to control countries from the point of view of the rule of law compliance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So on the 1st of January 2025, Poland will take over the presidency of the EU. What are the main priorities of your presidency in the field of justice?
We want to concentrate on different issues concerning, I would name it security of citizens. So we want to deal a little bit with protection of children against sexual abuse. We want to take care about protection of victims of crimes. We would like to think about the use of AI and possible consequences of the AI for the security of citizens. So this question of security would be a little bit like the umbrella pattern of thinking for us. But I have, like, I would say, my pet topic in the context of the presidency, which is connected with what we are fighting for. So we are fighting for the rule of law and for the survival of the rule of law in my country. And moreover, during all those times, Poland has contributed to creation of a number of mechanisms and instruments. Look at conditionality mechanism. Look at the use of Article 7, which is, right now, more or less, we know how it works. Look at infringement proceedings by the Commission. Look at the whole case law of the Court of Justice and the rule of law reports. It is, I wouldn't say Polish contribution, but Polish problems contributed to creation of those mechanisms. But please look that, as I said, in 2023 we had this peaceful elections that contributed to the change of power in Poland, but it would not happen without involvement of the Polish civil society, human rights defenders, members of academia, and bar associations. So I would like to put emphasis on to what extent EU supports proper development of the civil society, human rights defenders, and academia that are becoming protectors of the rule of law and democracy in all the EU member states. So in my opinion, the EU should invest a lot of money, energy, and protection of laws into supporting different parts of civil society, because otherwise rule of law and democratic principles would not defend themselves. And that would be important topic for us. So for example, we are going to talk about implementation of anti-SLAPP directive. We are going to talk about implementation of the European Media Freedom Act. We would like to check what is the effectiveness of using the EU money for supporting different NGOs. What is the level of independence of bar associations, to what extent they cooperate with themselves on a transborder level. All different things that are strengthening the civil society as one of the key values of the European integration.
Okay. Mr. Bodnar, you have known the Academy of European Law for many years. You were a regular speaker at our human rights protection events, gender equality law, and anti-discrimination law. You are now the representative of the Republic of Poland on our governing board. And my question is, which role do you see for ERA as a European training institute in a time of geopolitical crisis and Euroscepticism? Do you have concrete expectations to ERA?
I think that ERA is great in this education on a very high level, on the very high level of specialization. It is also like a very important network of connecting people. To be honest, there were some situations when, after some trainings, after some meetings here, I was really inspired by. I will even give you one example, just like one very specific example which comes from training in Trier. I remember one guy who was a barrister from UK and who was a person with disability, and he had some different problems in the UK Bar Association. That basically they had some strange rules that if you are that you have some level of disability, you cannot properly represent your clients, and basically that you cannot fully perform in this profession. Okay, and he fought with this, and he won, I think, this battle. But he was really inspirational for me. And I remember that after coming back, it was 2012 or 2013, I have started a project of creating a guide for the Polish judges and prosecutors about recognition of different forms of belonging to minorities or vulnerable groups. So somehow I realized that if you are a lawyer who is a graduate of a law school, you don't know what are national ethnic minorities in your country, what are different types of disabilities, what are different types of what are different religions and beliefs, what are the differences concerning all those LGBT plus issues. It is not something that you can be learned during your school years or at the university. Mm-hmm. Somehow it is taken for granted that you know it somehow, okay? Mm-hmm. But then when you are a judge and somebody is coming from a certain minority is coming to a court, is requesting certain treatment, and you are kind of lost because you don't know how to behave, okay? Mm-hmm. So we have created a guide that has been approved by a number of institutions, and I remember that was exactly the result of this kind of a networking and inspiration coming from here, from Trier. But for the future, I think that we should think about all the people that are here, not as teachers, as trainers, as participants, not just as people who are getting higher and higher level of specialization in a given field, but also a little bit like as agents that are promoting a certain vision of world and and they have the certain ability and understanding of how the EU law works. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine that if they are coming to their home country, they are those ones who are telling not only how to resolve a given, let's say, anti-discrimination case, but they are able to talk publicly in different local communities, schools, among seniors and so on, why this EU law is important, why it matters to our lives, why it is changing our reality. So they are not experts about, let's say, how to interpret right to be forgotten from the GDPR, okay, and how to make like a proper case before the Court of Justice of the EU and how to make this proper preliminary reference, okay? But they simply know how, in a general way, to explain to the general public what is this GDPR and why the EU, as such, is legislating on this issue. So in my opinion, so that is how I would see it, that you are not just training, that your responsibility is much higher than just creating like this big group, big network of great lawyers, but also educators, communicators, influencers that are able to speak professionally on the EU law and explain to the public the value of the EU law to the daily living of citizens. That is something that is really needed, that people don't understand. If you would ask, let's imagine, you have a teenager, you ask him about, let's say, the EU law, maybe he or she would tell you something about, battles and, those cups stuff. Maybe some other would tell you something about the charger. But then if you try to explain them, that they are subject of hate speech on internet and that there is a Digital Services Act, and that you had to adopt this Digital Services Act at the level of the EU because it is about big social media platforms that are operating on the global scale, then somehow they start to understand, so it means it is important to our life, okay? But we need to have this kind of ability, we need to have this network of people that are able to speak like this in different situations, different opportunities. So that is how I would see the Academy of European Law. Not just specialization, but also training on how to communicate properly what is the EU law really about.
Thank you very much. I think we are on the same line.
Okay. Thank you.
We are close to reach the end of this interview. Maybe I have one last question, a bit more personal. Mm-hmm. While preparing this interview, I've read that you are still presented as a human rights activist. And I was thinking, wow, activist is someone fighting for a cause, fighting for policies in place. And now you are at power. Has a kind of reality principle overtaken you, or do you cope with that? Or maybe you are not an activist at all. And I withdraw my question.
I think, of course, I'm a politician right now, okay? So I'm responsible for delivering a certain results to voters. But I'm in a very special position because I'm in this position after 8 years of violating basic principles of the rule of law and human rights. So some of my policies, or most of my policies, are very much in line with my thinking about human rights. So, for example, if I see the judgment Pietrzak and others against Poland, which concerns surveillance, I don't look at this judgment from the point of view that that it is a blame for the Polish state, but rather as the opportunity how to finally reform the Polish state from the point of view of surveillance. Yesterday I was speaking in the Senate, and I was representing the position of the government concerning the ratification on the convention, UN Convention on Enforced Disappearances. So for me, it was even a pleasure to speak on this convention in such a way that I really know why this instrument is important. Moreover, that I can move forward with ratification of some additional protocols to the European Convention on Human Rights. That even here, during different European Council, during meetings of the Council of European Union, I can talk about some specific issues, knowing in detail why they matter. The only problem is that sometimes your policy objectives may clash with some typical human rights standards. There are some situations which are not only difficult to me, but I would say to the whole government. I think especially the situation at the Polish-Belarusian border, where on the one hand we have this practice of illegal migration, and on the other hand the government is not allowing for this illegal migration, because government knows that it is kind of a hybrid weapon used against Polish authorities, as well as against Lithuanian authorities and so on, used by Russians in order to destabilize situation in Poland. But in my opinion, what is in you that even being the politician, you still have this kind of understanding that you have to do all the time balancing of different policy objectives with human rights, but at the end of the day you must be also effective towards your voters. But also it means that sometimes I may say no to my prime minister or to some people in the government, to some policies with which I cannot agree, and they know that they have to also somehow accept me still in the government if they want to cooperate with me. So I hope that every day I'm trying to build a trust, and I hope that despite being in the government, I still deserve trust of hundreds of Polish NGOs and civil society leaders.
Mr. Bodnar, thank you very much for this interview. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you much. Thank you.